Kirby and the Dogs start spring ball next week. We'll get to hear from Kirby Smart a little bit on a regular basis over the next month. I'll probably, barring any changes, I'll probably get an opportunity to go to some practices. And I have 3 questions heading into spring. I have more questions than that, but I want to focus on 3 of them today about these Dogs. Heading into this, obviously there's going to be summer workouts and there's going to be fall camp. But I feel like you learn a lot about what you have in the spring, and it's a good precedent for heading into the season. I think battles are won in practice. Battles are won on a weekly basis. But you can really pave way and make some progress during spring. Georgia obviously has some turnover. You're going to have that every year in college football. I think some of it is more difficult to replace than other parts. But look, I got 3 questions heading into spring ball. First one, you got the secondary figured out. Where are you at, Kirby and company? Where are you at in figuring out who the starting 5? Let's call it the starting 5 like basketball, because a lot of the time Georgia does play in a nickel type of package where there are 5 DBs on the field. So who are the 2 safeties? Who are the 2 corners? Who is your star, your nickelback, your spear, whoever? What do you want to call it? The slot corner. Okay, because the only, I think, dead set starter you got is Malachi Starks. Is that fair? I mean, Malachi Starks, I think, is the only pretty much locked in starter in Georgia's secondary heading into spring. What else do we know? And he'll be back there at one of the safety spots. There are 3 starters who are departing in Kamari Lassiter at corner, Javon Bullard at safety, and Tyke Smith at safety. Both of those were kind of hybrid defensive backs that played multiple positions. So I think that, one, you got to fill 3 spots. You got to fill 3 starting spots, and that's also under the assumption that Dalen Everett wins his job back as one of the starting corners. And I'm going to predict that he does, and I'm going to work under the assumption that Dalen Everett does do that. I think that he got better as the year went on. I think that sometimes being a first-time starter can be tough. Replacing the production of the last couple of years of Keely Ringo and Darion Kendrick. Those are the names that Everett was filling in for, and I think that he did a better job as the year went on. People pick apart specific plays where players get burned, right? Like, people were freaking out when he got burned by Luther Burden in Sanford Stadium, Missouri wide receiver who's going to be playing on Sundays in the future. There were plays like that. I thought it was the same way I felt about Kamari Lassiter in 2022, right? Okay, he's getting beat a few times. Well, gets more comfortable in his shoes. So a long athletic corner, Everett, I think he'll remain the starter. Ryan Curley from Dawg Post here talking about the questions that I have for Georgia heading into the spring. The question I have for you is, are you signed up for the Dawg Post newsletter? That link is down below. Thank you to those who have done that already. You want to be up to date on everything Georgia football. Make sure you sign up for the newsletter, because I'll hit your inbox every single day in the afternoon or when there's breaking news. I think Julian Humphrey will end up winning the second corner job for Georgia. And the reason why I said at the beginning of it I didn't want to just say that Dalen Everett's job was set in stone was because I think that Julian Humphrey could have taken it towards the end of that year and been the other corner on the other side of Kamari Lassiter. Julian Humphrey, I thought that he looks a little bit faster, maybe a little bit better in coverage than Dalen Everett. To my untrained eye, air quotes on untrained, to my untrained eye, I thought Julian Humphrey looked a little bit better in game situations than Dalen Everett. Now I feel like they'll probably be the duo on the outside, because you want to experience guys that have played, especially at a position like that, when you're guarding some really good players, right? When you talk about the SEC and the guys that they're going to have to deal with on a weekly basis, you want your best guys out there no matter what. But at corner, especially a defensive back, especially, it feels like it's ultra important. And I think it'll be those 2 guys that win the job. A couple players to note: A.J. Harris, I think he has an opportunity to fight for it. And all the freshmen, I think, have an opportunity to fight for it at that corner spot. A little bit thinner at corner than you would think. Ellis Robinson, Andre Evans, DeMello Jones, those freshmen, they're going to have an opportunity to compete for time. But at the end of the day, I do think they'll go with experience in the 2 juniors in Dalen Everett and Julian Humphrey. But at safety, you've got some other questions. People are going to be competing for that nickelback slot that I think Janelle Aguero will win. He'll be a sophomore this year, former 5-star, super athletic, freaky athlete. That's what I have to say about him from what I saw at spring practice last year. I thought that he definitely could play this position, and now he was the second string during his freshman season behind Tyke Smith for that. I think that you can easily elevate him into that role. That's my opinion on it, at least. Transfer, Jake Pope, is he going to take one of the jobs from the jump? Is that going to be obvious in the spring? Is he even allowed to be there during the spring? I realize when I'm saying this, his transfer rules were a little bit different with Alabama, so we will discover that next week. But he will be competing for this job, whether he's in Athens or not. And he'll be competing with guys like Ja'Cory Thomas and David Daniel and freshmen like KJ Bolden. We'll see if KJ Bolden has anything to say about it. Is Dan Jackson just clearly better than the rest of them? I think they have multiple questions within one large question is, where are you at with your secondary? Because last year, there was a battle for a cornerback spot, and that was pretty much it. And Dalen Everett won that. This year, there's multiple battles. And I talked about transfer Jake Pope. That weaves into my next question. How are the transfers looking on offense? How are they weaving into this offense? Brock Bowers, Lad McConkey, they're gone. And they were the two best offensive weapons pretty much the last couple of years, at least on the outside. And consistency is added into that when I say that. And so, yeah, you're losing guys that Brock Bowers would be a first-round pick. Lad McConkey might be a first-round pick. That's the type of talent you're losing on the outside at receiver, tight end, pass catcher, however you want to call it. How are the new weapons gelling? Is Carson Beck developing chemistry with guys like London Humphreys and Michael Jackson III and blanking on the third, Kobe Young? Is he going to gel with those three guys? I thought he gelled with Dominic Lovett pretty quickly last year. Ra Thomas was not quite... he didn't grow in Georgia's offense as quickly at the beginning as Dominic Lovett did, if that makes sense. I'm not saying he didn't grow. I actually think Ra Thomas has an opportunity to be Georgia's best receiver this year. Totally on the table for him. But Dominic Lovett, it was a little bit more obvious during spring last year. Okay, this guy's going to be a big part of the offense, and he ends up being one of the top pass catchers for Georgia last year. I believe second behind Brock Bowers. So... yes, it is important what you can do in spring. More importantly than those receivers, actually, is how does Trevor Etienne look as Georgia's running back? He's the guy that was brought in to be the new RB1, right? That's what makes sense to me, because I don't think Branson Robinson is really going to be working out in a full capacity this spring. So I do think your kind of obvious lead back during the spring is Trevor Etienne. Does he look like a lead back? So how are the transfers doing? Because that is going to be important for Georgia. There are a lot of leftover pieces like Dylan Bell and the two transfers from the year prior in Lovett and Thomas. You got Arian Smith. You've got returning running backs like Roderick Robinson. So there are other weapons, but how are the new ones weaving in with the rest of them? And probably in order of importance, Trevor Etienne 1, the receiver group 2. As far as how they're weaving in. Because I think Carson Beck's a really good quarterback. He's one of the best in the country. I did a whole video about how ESPN is predicting that he is the best quarterback in college football. Look, I agree. And that's where Georgia's at. They've got a guy like that in Carson Beck behind them. How are those weapons serving him? How is Carson serving those weapons? Is the chemistry there? My last question heading into this spring. And it's one that we might not learn in the spring. It's one that may never get answered, or the answer may just be no. Is there an elite guy in the front seven that will emerge? More specifically, kind of in that front 4 or 5. Is there going to be an elite pass rusher, an elite game wrecker? And it could be a linebacker, but is someone going to just make an impact and make it obvious that, hey, I mean business this spring, I mean business this fall? Georgia's got some really, really good players in its front 7. It's got a returning linebacker in Smile Mondon that has a ton of experience, and he is a freaky athlete. I think he could totally have a big year. Mykel Williams, you're a guy that's projected to be a first-round pick, right? Yes, Nolan Smith, first-round pick, wasn't ultra-productive. Jordan Davis, all those guys, none of them were like ultra-productive. But this Georgia front 7 isn't as stacked with NFL talent the way it was 2 years ago, last year, right? I just don't think it is. And if it is, it's because we haven't seen them grow yet into that. But Mykel Williams, I think you need more than 4.5 sacks. Is that a big ask? I don't think that's a big ask, but a guy like Michael Williams, who I think we see the Trayvon Walker comparisons, you see the long arms, you see the strength, you see the pass rushing skills. Is he going to merge? Is it going to look like he's taken a step forward during spring? Does a guy like Damon Wilson, who was exciting people towards the end of the year as a true freshman last year, does he come in and kind of take one of those outside linebacker / pass rusher roles? There are spots to take there, right? When you have transfers like Darius Smith and Marvin Jones Jr. leave. So is an elite pass rusher, is an elite presence in the front seven. There's excitement about Jordan Hall, defensive tackle. He'll be a second year. I think that they'll need someone to step up. You have guys returning like Nazir Stackhouse, Warren Brinson there on the defensive line. Obviously, Michael Williams is going to be in his third year. Smile Munden in year 4. Jalen Walker, a guy who might be like their most purely talented guy in the front seven. I think he's kind of a raw talent, a guy that they could put all over the place. Is someone going to step up and just be a game changer? They've had several people step up and be game changers at the same time. I think all it takes is one or two to really change a defense. And I want to know during the spring if anyone is making it obvious that it's going to be them. Those are my 3 questions right now heading into the spring. I might have more, and if I do, I'll make another video. But in the meantime, thanks for watching this one, and thank you for signing up for the newsletter.